Hello everyone, welcome to Chetan Bharat Learning. In this video, we are going to cover the current affairs related to geography and environment that had been in news from the time period 3rd September to 9th September. We are covering the current affairs on weekly basis. You have the schedule on what day you receive, like what subjects current affairs. You already have that schedule. Today in this video, we are going to cover current affairs related to geography and environment. First of all, let us see like what all issues were there in news and what all would we be covering. There is this report by United Nations Environment Program on the effect of food wastage on climate change and how can we mitigate the effects of climate change by changing our food habits, by introducing certain changes in the food systems. So we'll be covering that issue first. Second, again in the down to earth, there was this article was there in the down to earth. Again in the down to earth, there was this article regarding importance of dead coral reefs. Usually we study about live coral reefs, that these are the most productive ecosystems of the world. But we have this tendency that we ignore dead coral reefs. But this report is saying that even the dead coral reefs are important. So we'll be deliberating on that aspect. Then these two issues were important. Rest of the things that we'll be covering, they would be important from the prelims point of view, and they're like more in the nature of general updates. We have already covered these topics. We have covered about monsoons, floods and things like that. We have covered about in one of our earlier videos, we had covered about Kaziranga National Park and habitat corridors that were being built in the Kaziranga National Park to connect it with other national parks, so that in this season there was flooding of the Kaziranga National Park. Earlier we had studied, and how were animals responding to this flooding? They were moving to other habitats. So to ease of this thing, the area of Kaziranga National Park has been increased lately. So there are certain general updates regarding this. In the last video, we covered about the Char Dham project. Again, certain prelim specific updates will be having. So these are the two main issues that we'll be covering, and then there are certain general updates that we'll be covering. So first of all, move to our first topic, that is the UN report on UN report on the effect of food habits on climate change. How the food systems contribute to climate change, and how can climate change efforts be enhanced if we change our food habits. So what this report is all about? First of all, you have to remember which agency has released this report. United Nations Environment Program, UNEP. It has released this report, enhancing NDCs for food systems. You know that in 2015 we had this Paris Climate Agreement. Under the terms of this Paris Climate Agreement, every country was supposed to have its own nationally determined contributions. And these nationally determined contributions, they were to be reviewed every 5 years. So the 5 years 2015, after 2015, the 5 years get completed in 2020. So the discussions are on how can we enhance these NDCs, these nationally determined contributions. So in this respect, in this aspect, UNEP has released a pre-report. It says that what governments can do, like it has analyzed the NDCs of different countries, the NDCs that were given by countries in 2015, 16, 17. So UNEP comes to this conclusion that countries in their respective NDCs, they are not focusing much on food systems. They are not focusing much on the food systems. Instead, like they are focusing on the other aspects like climate change, emissions from vehicles and such like things. UNEP feels that this can be a low-hanging fruit. Why UNEP thinks so? Because, like according to UNEP, around 24% of the global emissions Around 24, almost 1/4 of the global emissions, they are from the agricultural sector, agricultural, forestry and land use related sectors. These sectors contribute around 1/4 of the global emissions. In view of this data, UNEP recommends that the changes in the food systems, they should be an integral part of the nationally determined contributions of different countries. Now, there is no single body that is implementing these NDCs. Now, it is clear from the very name only, nationally determined contributions. But UNEP recommends that countries, the respective countries, they should include this food systems approach within their nationally determined contributions. Like what kind of things, like what all can be considered to be a part of food systems approach? How the food is being produced. Do we rely on monoculture, that is the cropping of a single crop, cultivating a single crop on a piece of land for like during different seasons, during all the seasons? If we are doing that, we are putting more pressure on land, we are using more inputs, and that is having a negative effect on the climate and environment, so we should avoid that. Similarly, food wastage, this food systems approach, it includes everything from right from the growing of the crop, right from the cultivation of the crop, right from the production of food up till the consumption and final disposal. Okay, wastage, food wastage should be reduced, it should be minimized. There should be a shift to plant-rich diets. Now, it's also a very common knowledge that animal-rich diets, meat-rich diets, they are more water-intensive, they are more energy-intensive. On the other hand, plant-rich diets, they are more environment-friendly. So, UNEP also recommends that there should be more emphasis on plant-rich diets. So such steps should be taken according to UNEP if we want to effectively address the climate change. It says that holistic understanding, holistic approach is required if we want to tackle climate change. And in that holistic approach, we must include the effect of the working of food systems, right from the production of the food to the consumption of the food and the ultimate disposal of the waste food. So this is all as far as this topic was concerned. This is the final recommendation that was there. Policymakers should consider applying a food systems approach to frame their NDCs more holistically. So I believe the topic should be clear to you. Now we'll be moving to our next topic regarding the coral reefs. First of all, let us discuss what is a coral reef. Before we discuss this coral, what is coral reef, let us know what is a coral. Coral polyp is an aquatic animal that lives in symbiotic association with zooxanthellae algae. There is this algae that lives within the body of coral polyp. The coral polyp, it consists of a very, its structure, its body, it's very kind of soft tissue. Lekin, to protect this soft tissue, this coral polyp has a very hard exoskeleton. We might have experienced the shelled objects, the shelled organisms. What is the shell? Shell is basically the hard exoskeleton. What purpose does a shell serve in the marine organisms, in the aquatic organisms? Shell protects the soft tissue of the aquatic organisms, of the marine organisms. So coral polyp is just another marine organism with a very soft tissue. But to protect its soft tissue, it has a very hard exoskeleton. You can say a kind of shell. Now, In the body of this coral polyp lives this algae, zooxanthellae algae. Why do we say that this is a symbiotic relationship? What is a symbiotic relationship? When both the organisms, they benefit each other, they live for the benefit of each other. And if we separate these two organisms, none of them can survive. If we separate zooxanthellae from the body of the coral polyp would die, zooxanthellae would die. This is symbiotic relationship of coral polyp and zooxanthellae algae. Now, what is it that coral polyp does for zooxanthellae algae, and what is it that zooxanthellae does for the coral polyp? Like, why they are so essential to each other? What is it that makes them so very essential for each other? Actually, coral polyp provides a very safe environment for zooxanthellae algae. How does it provide a safe environment? It has this hard exoskeleton. This hard exoskeleton of the coral polyp provides a safe environment. The shell of the, you can say a shell of the coral polyp, it provides safe environment for zooxanthellae algae. And this zooxanthellae algae in turn, it is an autotrophic organism. That is, it produces its own food by the process of chemosynthesis or photosynthesis. It produces its own food. This food produced by the zooxanthellae algae, it serves as the food requirement for the coral polyp. Now, all of us require food for survival. We prefer say a plant rich diet or the animal rich diet, say a vegetarian diet, non-vegetarian diet. We have the external sources of food. Plants do not require external sources of food. Plants prepare their own food. Rather, they also fulfill our needs for food, our demands for food. Same thing is true about this zooxanthellae algae. It produces its own food, and the food produced by zooxanthellae algae, it also serves the needs of coral polyps. Around 40 to 50% of the food needs of the coral polyp, it is fulfilled by the zooxanthellae algae living within its body, living within the hard exoskeleton. So this is the mutually beneficial symbiotic association of coral polyp and zooxanthellae algae. Now, this was all as far as the living aspect was concerned. Now we come to coral reef. What is reef? Reef is a rocky structure. Reef is a rocky structure built by colonies of corals. Now, it's not like corals are like one coral, two corals are living isolated life. Rather, corals live in the colonies. Hundreds of thousands of corals, millions of corals, they live very close to each other in the colonies. And all the corals have this very hard exoskeleton. Because of this very hard exoskeleton of hundreds of thousands of millions of corals, a hard rocky structure is formed. This hard rocky structure is known as coral reef. Now, obviously, this coral reef is very productive habitat from the point of view of biodiversity. Because first of all, its shape is very irregular. So very small marine organism, very small aquatic organisms, crabs, worms, small fish, they live around the coral colonies. They live around the coral reefs. Second, aspect of the ecological importance of coral reefs. What is this hard exoskeleton? What is this hard exoskeleton? It is made up of calcium carbonate. And to make this calcium carbonate, coral reefs, coral polyps, corals, they sequester carbon dioxide from atmosphere. We say that oceans act as carbon sinks. oceans act as carbon sinks. कि carbon dioxide from atmosphere gets sequestered, gets absorbed within the oceans. A part of it is dissolved carbon dioxide. You ignore that part. That part is also important, like in this aspect it's not important. So carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is sequestered, is absorbed by the oceans. Part of it is dissolved carbon dioxide. Lekin a part of it gets converted into calcium carbonate, which exists in the form of hard exoskeleton of marine organisms. So there are two benefits of coral reefs. One is the direct biodiversity aspect, that corals themselves, the algae themselves, and many marine organisms live in the colonies of corals, live in the coral reefs. Second aspect is coral reefs, the hard exoskeleton of the coral reefs, coral polyps, it contributes to the sequestration of carbon from the atmosphere. The oceans or the coral reefs particularly, they act as carbon sinks. So this is the importance, the ecological importance of coral reefs. Lekin whatever we have talked about here is true with respect to the live coral reefs. This association, as long as this association is continuing, we say that the coral reef, the coral organism lives and the coral reef is live. On the other hand, there can be certain situations, there can be certain conditions in which this association ends, where zooxanthellae says, I don't want to live with coral polyp. My survival within the coral polyp is difficult. The moment they separate from each other, both the organisms die. The coral polyps die because coral polyp is not able to satisfy its food requirement. Earlier its food requirements were being satisfied by zooxanthellae algae. Now coral polyps cannot satisfy its food requirements and it eventually dies. This process is known as coral bleaching. Coral bleaching, when the coral polyps die in mass numbers, it is known as coral bleaching. Why coral bleaching? When do we use this term bleaching? Okay, bleaching powder, like when do we use this? What happens in bleaching? It is discoloration. Earlier, when the case that we have already studied, the live coral reefs, they are very colorful, like visually they are very colorful habitats. Blue color, brown color, very like green color, very colorful habitats are there. But, and this color is, why this color? Color is on account of zooxanthellae algae. Coral polyps themselves, they are colorless. They're very like pale organisms in color. But zooxanthellae algae provides color to the coral reefs. But when coral bleaching happens, when does the coral bleaching happens? When the symbiotic association ends, when zooxanthellae leaves coral polyps and coral polyps die. When zooxanthellae leaves coral polyps, so the color that was provided by zooxanthellae, that also leaves, and we see a very like pale colored, dull colored or white colored, nearly white colored rocky structure is what is left behind. This process is known as coral bleaching. Now, there can be multiple circumstances in which this coral bleaching happens. Corals are very sensitive to temperature changes. So any change in the ocean temperature may affect the habitats of corals, may affect the colonies of corals, and ultimately may contribute to coral bleaching. Corals, again, they are very sensitive to turbulence in the oceans. They are very sensitive to turbulence or pollutants entering the ocean. So if any such event happens, the coral, what is the response of coral polyps? They simply, like zooxanthellae leaves the coral polyps and coral polyps get bleached and coral bleaching takes place. So multiple reasons can be there how coral bleaching takes place. Like, what is important? After coral bleaching, what is left behind is, now we are coming to the topic, the issue that was in news, that was given in the Down to Earth magazine. Dead coral reef. Simply a rocky structure made by the dead bodies of the coral polyps. A rocky structure made by the hard exoskeleton of the dead coral polyps. Earlier, we were of the view that if the coral reef has died, if it is a dead coral reef, its ecological importance has also reduced. But the study says that, the new study says that dead coral reefs are as important as the live coral reefs. Why say? What is their basis? Like, again, the basis was very common sense. I don't know why this is a new study. We have studied two ways, two aspects in which coral reefs contribute to the environment and biodiversity. One is that they provide habitat to lot many animals. Second is, by their hard exoskeleton, they help to sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. If the coral reef is not living, if the corals are not living, if the coral polyp has died, then that organism will not be able to sequester carbon dioxide. That organism, because na rahega baans, na bajegi bansuri. If the organism is not living, it will not make its new shell. It will not sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So it's this role, the role of coral reef in sequestering carbon dioxide, that has minimized when the coral reef is dead. But what about the second aspect? Because of its peculiar structure, because of its peculiar shape, coral reef was acting as a habitat for so many small marine organisms. We call these marine organisms cryptic marine organisms, the hidden sea creatures. Like, there is this famous in our culture, we say that there is this Matsya Nyaya, law of the fish. What is this Matsya Nyaya? What is this law of the fish? That in the sea, badi machli choti machli ko khati hai. That the larger predator fish consumes smaller fish. This is the law of the fish. This is, like, we call it as Matsya Nyaya in our culture. Now, in order to save themselves, what do small sized fish do? What do small creatures do? They try to hide within the dark places or the convoluted places, and the coral reef provides that structure. Since coral reef provides that structure, and it doesn't matter whether the coral reef is dead or alive, the structure of the coral reef would remain the same. It would still act as habitat for cryptic marine organisms, the small size sea organisms that prefer a veiled habitat, a concealed habitat. Okay? Cryptic, we say encryption, छुपे हुए, hidden sea creatures. Clear? So this was all as far as the dead coral reefs was concerned. We have already covered all these aspects. The dead coral reefs support cryptic animals, the hidden sea creatures including fishes, snails, crabs, worms, who hide under this rubble to save themselves from predators. Clear, Ajay? So these were the two issues that were prominently in news in the last week. Now we'll be covering certain general updates. Like, the first update is regarding the Kaziranga National Park and Tiger Reserve. Where is this Kaziranga National Park? I believe all of us should know that, and most of you would already be knowing that it is in the state of Assam, on the banks of river Brahmaputra. What is it known for? Interestingly, it is known for the Indian rhino, the one-horned Indian rhino. It is known for tiger conservation. Rather, it is like a tiger reserve as well. Kaziranga National Park and Tiger Reserve. Then it is famous for elephant conservation. So these are the three main animals that are preserved here, that the Kaziranga National Park is famous for. Most importantly, it is known for rhino conservation. The largest rhino population in India is found in this Kaziranga National Park. So what was the news? What is the update regarding this Kaziranga National Park? A few weeks back, we had covered this issue that there was flooding in Assam because of the erratic monsoon. So the Kaziranga National Park got flooded. What was the response of the tigers? What was the response of the elephants and the rhinos? They tend to move to the adjoining forested regions. So what government has done? Government has notified that the area of Kaziranga National Park would be increased by around 3,000 hectares. This is an attempt to connect this Kaziranga National Park with adjoining national parks like Orang National Park, Nameri National Park. These are the two national parks. We had covered the names of these national parks in our earlier video as well. Orang and Nameri National Park. These national parks, like if we cover the geography of the region, Kaziranga National Park is on the south bank of river Brahmaputra. This is river Brahmaputra. On the south bank of Brahmaputra is the Kaziranga National Park. On the north bank of Brahmaputra, these Orang and Nameri National Park. So this extension of Kaziranga National Park, first of all, it includes, like you might have studied in geography, or will eventually, when we'll cover this topic in our class, we'll cover in that portion that there are certain riverine islands in Brahmaputra. River Brahmaputra is so wide that there are many riverine islands within this river. So what this extension tries to do, that if there is an island like this, if there is a riverine island like this, this portion is included within the domain of the Kaziranga National Park. So that if animals choose to swim and cross over to Orang National Park or Nameri National Park, it would be easier for them. And the riverine islands, they are part of the national park itself. It's not that people are doing agriculture over there, people are doing certain sand mining over there. So to protect this habitat, this portion is included as the part of Kaziranga National Park. Just a general update. And we had also covered that over here are the hills of Karbi Anglong. Here also, certain animals, they move to this region because it is a highland region. It is an upland region. To escape flood, animals would move to the hills of Karbi Anglong. So connecting this region with Karbi Anglong was important, hence the expansion of Kaziranga National Park. Now this update is important because we can duplicate this model across different national parks. There can be other national parks which are facing the same problem, and this is how we can find a solution to that problem. So this was the update regarding the Kaziranga National Park. General update regarding the monsoon, that the Indian Meteorological Department says that the maximum rainfall has been received in the month of August since 1926. As such, there is very little probability of such things being asked in the exams. So, but it was something related to monsoon general updates. So I had given a screenshot over here. But in this news, a very important aspect was also given: the auxiliary benefits of reading newspaper. News is in a different context, but we get certain auxiliary information by reading the newspaper. That is why we at Chetan Bharat Learning, we always suggest that you should read at least one newspaper daily. Whichever newspaper you are comfortable with, be it the Hindu, be it the Indian Express, be it whatever, one newspaper you must necessarily read every day. It not just enhances your current affairs, it just broadens your horizon. You just get to know so many auxiliary things which are otherwise important from the point of view of healthy living, from the point of view of your general awareness, and just how you conduct yourself, how you present yourself. And Here we have the live example. You get certain auxiliary information as a fodder for your exam as well. For example, this year in 2020, IMD has launched urban flood forecasting services for 2 cities, Mumbai and Chennai. And it plans to extend this system eventually to Bengaluru and Kolkata as well in the next phase. Eventually, to like lot many cities would be covered, but to start with, they have started with Mumbai and Chennai, and in the next phase they plan to extend it to Bengaluru and Kolkata. Urban flood forecasting services. Clear? Again, certain further information for your prelims exam. One more thing. Recently, we had seen that this thing was in news that a tanker, an oil tanker, had caught fire, and it was proving very difficult for the agencies, the naval agencies or the coast guard agencies, to douse this fire. So, like, what was this issue about? First of all, you will remember the name of the ship. Again, I don't think that you'll be asked the names of the ship, but like, because it was in the news, so that we can have discussion. MT New Diamond. This ship was plying between Kuwait and India, Kuwait to Paradip port. It was bringing in oil supplies, and when it was off the coast of Sri Lanka, it caught fire. So it took almost 2 days for the Indian and the Sri Lankan Navy and the Coast Guard to put off this fire. Why is this important? Because, like, first is the obvious thing that if the oil tanker is burning, it is contributing to the ecological damage. It is contributing to the greenhouse emissions. Second, the economic loss, the economic aspect of it. So much oil is getting burned, and this oil was already paid for. India had already paid for this oil, and so like somebody had paid for it. So economic loss associated with it. Third and the more important, the aspect regarding which the authorities were more worried, that this thing, if the fire is unchecked or like if some major damage happens to the ship, then it may result in the oil spill. The oil that was being carried in this tanker, this oil may spill over the surface of the ocean. And what is the negative effect of this oil spill? It makes a very thin layer of oil all over over a very large area of ocean. Over a very large area of sea is covered by a very thin layer of oil. Now, this thing has implications for the aquatic biodiversity, for the marine biodiversity. Because oil is forming a layer all over the surface, now it becomes difficult for the exchange of gases. The oxygen, it is difficult for the marine organisms of the oceans to sequester oxygen or carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The marine organisms living within the oceans, they require oxygen. And there is continuous exchange of gases taking place. If this is the surface of the ocean, the oxygen from atmosphere is continuously getting absorbed over here. Carbon dioxide from oceans is continuously absorbed here. And there is this equilibrium. Oxygen is also being released, carbon dioxide is also being released. But if the surface would be covered with oil, then how would the exchange of gases take place? This would inhibit the respiration and other life processes of the aquatic animals living within that zone. That is why we are so wary of the oil spills. And we are, from a very long time now, we are trying to develop certain mechanisms. We are trying to develop certain systems in which this oil spill can be checked. Certain bioremediation techniques are being tried. like there is this bacteria that is being developed, that we can spread that bacteria over that surface so that this bacteria can feed on this oil and remove the oil from the surface of the sea. So that is all, that is the different aspects that we'll be covering in detail later. For now, what was the news? That this tanker plying between Kuwait and Paradip port in India, on the east coast of India, it caught fire off the coast of Sri Lanka and it has been successfully doused off. Last topic that we'll be covering in today's class, it is just a simple update regarding the Char Dham project. In the last video, we had covered that this Char Dham project in Uttarakhand tries to connect the Char Dhams. What are these Char Dhams? Kedarnath, Badrinath, Yamunotri, Gangotri. By widening the road access to these dhams. But this road widening process was impacting the green cover in that zone. So a case was being lodged in, appeal was being filed in Supreme Court. National Green Tribunal was supposed to give its decision regarding certain aspects of this project. Ministry of Environment had to give the clearance regarding certain portion of this aspect. So what is the update? Supreme Court has asked the central government to adhere to the ministry circular on roads, that if certain trees get destroyed, if deforestation takes place for any developmental activity, equivalent amount or rather more amount of compensatory afforestation must be done at some different place, and there should be strengthening of the banks and the embankment should be built so that there is no damage to the ecology of the area. So this was general update regarding the Char Dham project. We had already covered the issues that are associated with this project. So with this, we complete our today's lecture. I hope you would have enjoyed today's videos, and whatever issues were there regarding the environment that had been in news in the last week we had covered, and you are well versed with those issues. So that's all from my side. All the best to all of you. Thank you and enjoy your studies.